All right, let's dive into one of the biggest questions humanity has ever asked. What is the soul? But we're going to come at it from a totally different direction today. We're going to put aside all the metaphysics and spirituality for a moment and look at this ancient mystery through the lens of cold, hard physics. So, what is it really? For thousands of years, the story has been that it's something separate from us, right? A ghost in the machine? Some kind of ethereal spark that animates our bodies. But what if that entire idea is just wrong? The traditional view is all about this duality. You have your physical body, and then you have this non-physical soul. But a really radical new theory is flipping that completely on its head. It suggests the soul isn't some separate thing in the body at all. Instead, it's a purely physical phenomenon, a property that arises from the body, kind of like how a magnetic field is generated by a magnet. It's not a separate passenger, it's a result of the machine itself. Now, to really get our heads around this, we're going to need a pretty bold thought experiment. This is one that really challenges how we think about who we are, and it all starts by looking at what we're literally made of. Okay, so a person who weighs about 70 kilograms is made of roughly 7 octillion atoms. That's a 7 with 27 zeros after it. It's a number so huge you can't even really imagine it. And these atoms, mostly just hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, they're just simple, non-living building blocks. Not a single one of them is alive or conscious or has a personality. So now imagine a machine from the distant future, a kind of hyper-advanced 3D printer that could scan your entire body down to the last atom and then rebuild it perfectly, putting every single one of those 7 octillion atoms back in its exact original spot. The process would be, pretty straightforward in theory. First, it scans you and creates a perfect atomic blueprint. Then, it uses that blueprint to rebuild you, placing every atom, every chemical bond in the exact same configuration to recreate your precise physical structure. So here's the big question. What do you get at the end of this process? A perfect but lifeless statue of yourself? Well, according to this new theory, the answer is a huge, resounding no. The result wouldn't be a statue. It would be a living, breathing person. It would be you, complete with all your memories, your personality, your consciousness. Now, how is that even possible? Well, it all comes down to this really powerful idea. Your consciousness, your memories, you. You're not something separate floating around inside your body. You are the information that's encoded in the unbelievably complex physical architecture of your body. So if you perfectly recreate the structure, you perfectly recreate the information. You recreate the person. I know that can feel a bit abstract. How does a pile of dead atoms suddenly become conscious just by being arranged in a special way? Let's bring it down to earth with an example we can all understand. Think about an old school mechanical watch. If I took one apart and just dumped the pieces on a table, all the little gears and springs and levers, what do you have? You just have a pile of metal. Not a single one of those parts can tell you the time. That property, time-telling, it just doesn't exist in the individual pieces. But the moment you assemble all those parts, according to a very specific plan, something almost magical happens. The watch starts to tick, and the hands start to move. It tells time. Now, you didn't add a time-telling spirit into the watch. That function, it emerged, purely as a result of the structure. The soul of the watch, if you will, is its function, and it's born from its architecture. This amazing phenomenon, where completely new properties just seem to appear from the interaction of simpler parts, it actually has a name, and it's a fundamental principle that we see across all of science. It's called emergence. It's this process where complex properties, like time-telling or even life itself, arise from components that don't have those properties on their own. The whole, as they say, truly becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And once you start looking for it, you see this concept everywhere. Think about it. A single molecule of H2O isn't wet, but get trillions of them together, and you get the emergent property of wetness. A single neuron can't think, but connect 86 billion of them in a brain, and consciousness emerges. A single note isn't a symphony. The symphony emerges from the precise arrangement of many, many notes. And that's maybe the most beautiful metaphor for this idea of a physical soul. It's the symphony, not the individual players. It's the holistic, unified consciousness that emerges from the entire orchestra of our cells and atoms. And that's why you can't find it by just looking at one piece under a microscope.
Okay, so this idea of an emergent physical soul isn't just a cool new definition. It also offers a surprisingly elegant solution to one of the oldest, most stubborn problems in all of philosophy.
This is the classic mind-body problem. It basically asks, if your mind or your soul is some non-physical ghost, how in the world does it pilot the physical machine of your body? How does an immaterial thought cause your very material arm to actually move? Where's the bridge that connects these two totally different realities? Well, the theory of emergence basically dissolves the problem. It says there aren't two different worlds. There's no ghost and there's no machine. There's just one single, unified physical system. Your decision to raise your arm is a particular physical state of your brain, an emergent property, that directly causes another physical state, which is your muscles contracting. No magic, no bridge needed, it's all one process. But, and this is a big but, as neat as this theory is, it leads us down a rabbit hole to a final, profound, and, well, maybe even a little bit frightening question. Let's follow this idea all the way to its logical conclusion. Okay, so if we accept this premise, if our soul, our identity, our consciousness is just an incredibly complex pattern of information that's encoded in our physical structure, kind of like software running on the hardware of our body, then that leads to an unavoidable question. Like any other pattern of information, from a file on your computer to an MP3, can it be copied? And if it can be copied, does that mean that two physically identical versions of you could exist at the very same time? Two people, both with your exact atomic structure? Just think about that copy for a second. It would wake up with every single one of your memories. It would have your exact personality, your fears, your jokes. From its point of view, it wouldn't feel like a copy at all. It would be absolutely 100% convinced that it is the original, the one and only real you. So, who's right? And that's the final thought we're left with. If you are a pattern, and patterns in principle can be duplicated, what does that do to our whole concept of a unique individual soul? It's a really challenging question, and it's one that this physical theory of consciousness forces us to look right in the eye. What does it really mean to be you?